how can we expect ourselves to have lives of joy and freedom and spiritual clarity when we are sowing the seeds of the opposite of that?
It's almost like some mad scientist, like Satan himself, designed these systems that are being used now to raise animals. It is absolute insanity.
I don't get how you can love everything Jesus says and then participate in a mechanized system of mass slaughter that involves pain beyond your wildest imagination.
Even keeping quiet and silent about the violence, you are part of that violence.
There's another passage in the Quran that says that because of the wrongs of humanity, there has been much corruption seen in the oceans and on land.
So for a few moments in which we're enjoying what is really just a palate preference, we're taking what is most essential to animals, their very lives. And that's the opposite of compassion, it seems to me.
We are ashamed of our ancestors who owned slaves. We are ashamed of our ancestors who believed in segregation. So too, our grandchildren will be ashamed of what we allowed to happen on our watch. Each of us has to ask ourselves a spiritual question. What side do I want to tell my grandchildren I was on? Was I on the side of mercy and compassion, or was I on the blind side that helped to perpetuate suffering?
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
This one is for you.
Let it shine, let it shine.
This is my daughter Melody. She's the reason I'm making this documentary. It's for her, and it's for all the children who will inherit whatever world we choose to leave them.
We got a potato.
Thank you for this food, and let it nourish our bodies and our spirits, and let it keep us healthy and happy and full of life and love and compassion for all of creation.
Be vegan.
Be vegan and be a champion for the people and be a champion for the planet and be a champion for the animals and be a champion for ourselves. And for all of these things, we say thank you, and so it is.
And be a champion for the animals, so it is.
I haven't always been a vegan. I was born in a small town in South Georgia during the late 60s, and I was raised a Southern Baptist. And I grew up eating a Southern version of the standard American diet, comprised mainly of meat, dairy, and eggs, mixed in with huge helpings of fast and processed foods. And like so many other kids eating the SAD diet, I suffered the SAD consequences, which range from mild asthma to severe allergies to tons of ear infections, styes, viruses, and zits, and too many more ailments that were considered normal to list.
Okay, I'm making this video for, my family back home, and I'm making this video, I'm looking at the mic, okay?
It wasn't until my mid-30s, living in New York City and attending a Unity church, that I became a vegan. It was studying the teachings of Jesus about kindness and compassion, and starting a daily meditation practice that really led me to a nonviolent diet, even though no one at Unity or anywhere else had ever even suggested I be vegetarian, and I never even heard the word vegan, much less knew any. Though it wasn't long before I started noticing that during Sunday brunch, the same ministers and chaplains who were teaching me about kindness and compassion for all were for some reason not including the innocent animals on their plates. But who was I to judge the choices of another? So I decided to live and let live and try to be a good example. And that worked for almost a decade, until after my daughter was born. And suddenly, I found myself with skin in the game, and a reason to care about what happens in the future.
Really? Is that so?
And then I saw the documentary Cowspiracy, where I learned that not only does animal agriculture create over half the greenhouse gases on the planet, but it's also the #1 user and polluter of water and the major cause of deforestation. Not to mention that the grains we use to feed billions of animals that we breed just for slaughter could much more effectively be fed to humans and could help save the nearly 9 million people who die from hunger each year. I felt I had to do something, but I didn't know what. So I did what I often do when I don't know what to do. I prayed and I meditated about it. And during that meditation, this question popped into my mind. How is it possible that a compassionate spiritual or religious person could support an industry that is responsible for the unnecessary suffering of billions of people, trillions of land and sea animals, and the devastation of the very planet we live on? That question would end up taking me on a journey throughout the United States and around the globe to explore the teachings of kindness and compassion that form the basis of all the world's main religions, and the not-so-main ones as well, and try to understand how so many people of faith are doing unto others that which they would never wish done unto themselves. The journey started when I traveled back to New York City to speak to Victoria Moran, who I had met once years earlier when she spoke at the Unity Church I attended while living in that beautiful city that never sleeps.
I personally don't understand why some of the people that I admire the most, people whose words and whose writings I completely revere, are eating our fellow creatures.
Victoria Moran is a much sought-after speaker, best-selling author, and host of the Main Street Vegan podcast. She's been an animal rights activist and vegan for over 30 years.
A great deal of spirituality is about belief. That's why we call it faith. I'm a person of faith. I'm a Christian, a yogic Christian, and yet I understand that there are people who have other spiritual beliefs and other spiritual views. So what can bring all spiritual people together as a whole believing community? To me, that is compassion. Because compassion is at the center of the message of Jesus. It's compassion that got the Jews out of bondage and to the promised land. We have all the Eastern religions that are ahimsa-based, nonviolence-based. So can we all agree that however we see God, however we see the road to salvation, being compassionate to one another and expanding that compassion out to all that has life is the true essence of spirituality? What else could it possibly be?
Which I think all the world religions, if you distilled them, the wisdom down to one sentence would be something like this: whatever you most want for yourself, give that to others. And this basic understanding that to give to others what you would like. Another way of saying it is, whatever you sow, you will reap. It's also the same thing. Whatever we put out, it'll come back.
Victoria put me in contact with Dr. Will Tuttle, who's a musician, an international speaker, and the best-selling author of The World Peace Diet. I sat down with Dr. Tuttle in Ocala, where he and his spouse Madeline were currently living in the solar-powered RV that they use while traveling around the country, speaking about animal rights and performing music.
From the time we were born, we were forced to participate in mealtime rituals by our parents and teachers and everyone in our community that essentially numb us and disconnected us. And so that when we get older, we take out our wallets and we vote for it. And we don't just vote for it, then we then eat it. So we actually bring it into our body. We give it to our children. This is not only toxic from the point of view of the level of physical health, but it's toxic from the point of view of our spiritual health, from the point of view of our cultural health, from the point of view of our ethical health. We don't actually hold the knife ourselves. We don't actually hold the electroshock prod ourselves. We don't actually hold the raping sperm gun ourselves and fire it. But we pay someone else to do that. And so we pay other people to do things that bring out the worst in them And yet all we see is something wrapped in plastic and styrofoam, very often served with a smile. And so there's this deep disconnection in our society. And I think it's that deep disconnection that is the greatest obstacle to authentic spiritual awakening. The authentic inner spiritual teaching of all the great religious wisdom traditions are pointing in the same direction. Kindness and compassion for all living beings is the path of awakening for all of us.
My next stop was Encinitas, California, where I would sit down and visit with Bob Isaacson, Buddhist, Dharma teacher, and co-founder and president of Dharma Voices for Animals.
The teachings of the Buddha regarding compassion and non-harming towards animals is not being followed by many Buddhist practitioners, teachers, and Buddhist centers. The Buddha said to his followers, if there is no eater of meat, there will be no destroyer of life. Whatever the karmic effect is to the person eating the animal, the person who has to slaughter the animal, the person that has to raise that animal for slaughter is incurring extremely unwholesome karma. Oftentimes, people who cannot find other jobs, people who are exploited terribly in slaughterhouses and in factory farming, why should these people incur negative karma, killing animals and raising animals for slaughter, when all we have to do is eat a plant-based diet?
Compassion is such an important key part of all traditions, but really looking at what that meant and how it extends to all living beings is a really important piece. So I have to say, these two lovely guys, they don't get along very well. Hello.
Need a little more compassion.
Yes.
I had left Bob and had traveled north to the hills of Topanga, where I met Lisa Levinson, the Sustainable Activism Campaign Director for In Defense of Animals and the founder of Vegan Spirituality.
I can recall being in a spiritual circle and raising the energy and doing some wonderful rituals. And then directly after that, we went to have lunch, and the lunch was a barbecue. And I just felt that energy drop all the way down to the ground and below, because it was just stunning to me that no one there thought, wow, these animals that they're eating have anything to do with spirituality. I had had similar experiences in other spiritual groups, and my friend Sandy had the same experience, and we were both so surprised that people who consider themselves spiritual and loving animals would eat animals.
From Lisa's, I headed down to LA to attend my first ever animal rights conference. It was much bigger than I had expected, and suddenly I felt a little less lonely as a vegan.
So the Good Food Institute is focused on making alternatives to animal products as delicious, as convenient, and as inexpensive as possible.
So if we had been having this conversation 150 years ago, people of faith would be saying slavery is in the Bible. Women are not chosen by Jesus to be his disciples, and we need to apply that sort of central organizing principle to politics. There certainly are, many times in the Bible, slaves obey your masters, wives obey your husbands. So these concepts, up until 150 years ago, were used to justify things that pretty much no Christians are going to continue to attempt to reconcile with their faith.
What is the core of Christianity? It's love. Is what we are doing to other creatures love? And for what purpose? Humans have no need to exploit other animals, certainly no need to eat them. There's just simply no way to be part of any world religion and not care about the suffering and the premature deaths of other animals. As a moral philosopher, I can say that ethics teaches that anytime there is suffering, it is morally considerable, and religions agree with that. So there's simply no way to be indifferent.
I have asked hundreds of people this simple question. The question I ask is, would you ever deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? And so far, 100% of the people I've asked have said absolutely not. He would never do that. So which means that compassion is at the core of our being. That's who we really are. This is the reason why collectively compassion is going to win.
Sailesh Rao is the founder and executive director of Climate Healers, a nonprofit organization whose goal is to reforest over 1/6 of the ice-free land area of the Earth. He is the author of Carbon Dharma and Carbon Yoga, and a co-producer for the documentaries Cowspiracy, What the Health, and The Human Experiment, as well as the one you're watching now.
In the Laudato Si that came out last year, Pope Francis said, "It is contrary to human dignity to cause animals to suffer or die needlessly." And then he visited the US, and in New York City he had a veal and lobster dinner. So that's when I realized how much suffering that these religious leaders are going through. Because when what we say and what we do are not in alignment, we suffer. We suffer tremendously.
Well, concern for animals has long been a part of Unitarianism and Universalism. Jeremy Bentham was a Unitarian legal scholar who in the 1860s said that the morally relevant question about animals was not whether they could reason or whether they could talk, but whether they could suffer. And it's so clear now with today's science, as it was clear then to anyone with common sense, that animals do suffer greatly, especially those in our food system, as it's been practiced in the past 50 years.
I was raised vegetarian and went vegan after I learned about what happens to dairy cows and egg-laying hens in factory farming and farming at large. So I'm really grateful that I made that decision. Now, it's also consistent with my Zoroastrian teachings in that Zoroastrianism teaches good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, telling the truth, taking care of the environment, showing kindness to animals who are at our mercy, and of course taking care of our body temples as well.
A concern is with a capital C. This is an issue that the Spirit has laid upon the heart of a particular friend or party of friends, that they feel they're called to speak up about it, to do something, to speak truth to power. And this is one of the reasons why friends have offered leadership in regard to human slavery, the equality of women, prison reform, and things of this sort. So we who are Quakers, who are concerned about the animals, consider this as a concern that God has laid upon us. And if people feel uncomfortable with it, to just relax and try to consider perhaps this is a legitimate concern. Perhaps the Spirit may be speaking to you through our words. Just be open to it if you can.
I have looked at a lot of different religions over the years, and my book, Peace to All Beings, goes into that quite a bit about looking for the core truth in each religion. And it turns out, as everybody pretty much knows, that love is the core truth of every religion. And then people come along and try to organize it and try to put rules on it and twist it around so it fits a certain mindset. And in many cases, the patriarchal mindset of domination, which started with animal agriculture, has infected a lot of religions.
There's a bumper sticker that says God's original plan was to hang out in the garden with some naked vegetarians.
It was during the AR conference that we had our first meeting of the Interfaith Vegan Coalition. Judy Carman, Lisa Levinson, and myself had started the coalition to provide faith-specific resources and tools for spiritual and religious individuals and institutions to help them widen their circle of compassion to include all of creation.
I think a lot of people are under the impression that all Native American people ate all meat all the time. And the fact is, they actually ate very little meat depending on the region that they were in.
After the conference, I drove up the coast to Petaluma, a small city north of San Francisco. There, I spoke to Linda G. Fisher, an artist, interspecies communicator, and Native American tribal member of the Ojibwe Nation.
I had someone say to me, oh, gee, you're vegan, you've been vegan for so many years, it must be quite a sacrifice. And I kind of smiled and said, it's no sacrifice at all. Once you know that animals feel, think, and love, and hurt, and cry, and embrace their babies, you know that it's not a sacrifice at all. And so I explained that to her. I said, what would be a sacrifice is if someone forced me to eat meat to save somebody else. That would be quite a sacrifice. I think if some of our great chiefs were alive today, they would be horrified and they would be incredibly heartbroken because they themselves would never do what we're doing today. If they didn't have to hunt, if they didn't have to kill, I don't believe there's any way they would have ever done that.
I wasn't back from California very long before Melody and I loaded up our trusty hybrid Sophia and left on a road trip down into Florida. Our first stop was Ocala, where Melody's grandpa Mike joined us for a potluck at Kindred Spirits Farmed Animal Sanctuary.
Mike actually was bought as a gag gift for somebody's wedding, and then after the wedding, they just tied him up outside the church and left.
The next day, our friend Logan, the director of Kindred Spirits, gave us a private tour of the sanctuary and introduced us to several of her furry friends.
You want to say hi to her? You can. She's very nice. She's a big nose, and it's soft. You can pet her if you want. She's very nice. There you go. Her nose is almost as big as your hand. That's how she says hi. And she opens her mouth and she says, that's how a pig says hi. It's nice to meet you. So Felicia and Gomer are from a factory farm in Iowa that flooded back in 2008. And so the farmers, they evacuated, but they left all their pigs locked up in buildings. So a couple of the pigs were able to escape and swim to freedom. And Felicia and Gomer and their friend Calypso, who's since passed, were part of a group that was rescued by Farm Sanctuary. And then they were placed here with us a couple years ago. They both kind of retired to Florida. They both have pretty severe arthritis, which is really common in the factory farm pigs because we bred them to only live about 6 months before they're used for food. So they're really not bred to live a long time. And they're bred to get as big as they can, as quick as they can, which means that it puts a lot of pressure on their leg joints. So these two are both about 9 now, and so arthritis is fairly common at that age. Their friendships are just really deep with each other. Like these guys came out of the factory together and they've been together ever since. It's just, I think, really important to them to have that kind of connection with each other, especially the guys from factories because they kind of start life without it. Like they can't touch their moms, which is really important. And the only real physical contact they have with anybody is a negative. So I think once they come into Sanctuary, it's really nice for them just to be able to have time with each other and like quality relationships with each other. And they grow to like us too. Like these two really like everybody. They love to meet new friends all the time because now they know it's safe and nobody's gonna hurt them.
From Ocala, we traveled down to Tampa, where we visited with our friends, and I had a chance to meet and speak with Bawa Jain, Secretary General of the World Council of Religious Leaders.
A body that brings together the world's preeminent religious leaders and see if these people can work together on the issues that impact us most, whether they be the environmental challenges, the issues of poverty, health, conflict. It's just harnessing the power of religion for the global good of all, not just some. I come from a tradition, a way of life called the Jains. Is one of the oldest way of life in the world. Live and let live. That's what we try and follow. Why are Jains vegetarian? Let's just understand that. When you talk about non-violence in thought, action, and deed, how can you be a practitioner of ahimsa of non-violence if you are going to consume any living beings? My guru came from the tradition where the Jain monks wear a face mask. They also carry a little broom made out of cloth that before they sit anywhere, they can brush off any form of life so they do not commit any violence and kill them. Similarly, the mask, the face is also that even the microorganisms in the atmosphere should not be killed. Now it is proven beyond doubt that if you want to get rid of the greenhouse gases, get rid of the slaughterhouses. It's a ticking bomb. It's a ticking bomb. Do we want that for our children and our children's children? How will they judge us at that time? What karma are we sowing that knowingly we are not taking any action? When we know something and we don't do anything, that also is creating karma, which is negative for us.
Hey Melody, you know where we're going? That's right, to the vegan cookie contest. There's gonna be like what? 1,200 cookies to be eaten tonight in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Susan Hargreaves and Animal Hero Kids invited several local Fort Lauderdale bakeries to offer up their best vegan cookies, and then everyone there got to eat one of each cookie and vote for their favorite. Melody and I thought all the ones we tasted were yummy, but didn't have enough room in our bellies to try them all.
In the early 80s, 1980, I learned how most animals are treated by visiting stockyards and slaughterhouses. And for 34 years now, I have been teaching kids about being kind to all animals. AnimalHeroKids.org is my baby because I know from visiting the schools that the children are naturally compassionate. They want to help animals. They want to make sure no one gets harmed. They're genuine and sincere, and their clear voices hearten me.
Oh, can you tell me any reason why you don't want a pet monkey? Yes, I can tell you lots of reasons. They smear their poop, they urine wash, they masturbate in public, they will bite your children, and they have big teeth. I had said that to one woman. She said, "Oh, sounds like my husband." But
our next adventure would take us to Jungle Friends Primate Sanctuary in Gainesville, Florida, where Carrie and her dedicated team of compassionate caregivers provide a healthy, happy life to over 300 primates who are ex-pets or retired from lab experiments, and others who have suffered exploitation, abuse, and neglect.
I talked to a researcher actually where I said, "Whatever happened with your project? Did you figure out?" And I won't go into exactly what they were trying to figure out. And he said, "They're never going to figure it out because even if they did and they could, they won't have their jobs and their grant money will end. So it's just going to always be something that they're going to be trying to figure out."
They're meant to be in the wild. I mean, there's no way you can make it right with them living like this. I mean, this is wrong. I wish none of these guys had to live like this.
In cages. I want all of them to be free.
I want them to be free. I don't want them in your living room. I don't want them at the lab. I don't want them at the zoo. And I don't even want them here, but there's nowhere for them to go.
It was at Jungle Friends that I reconnected with Maya Barak, a holistic veterinarian from Tel Aviv, Israel, who I had met at the Animal Rights Conference in LA. Maya would join Melody and me for a 2-week road trip that would take us through 13 states on our quest of compassion. Our journey started with a visit to Ruderville Animal Sanctuary, where Maya would introduce us to her friend, Elaine West, the founder of Ruderville and a devout Christian.
You change your diet and change your life. That's what I love to tell people because it's true. And it's not just your health. It's physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every way. This will change your life. And it's going to open you and soften your heart. And we're not supposed to have hard hearts. Adam was a gardener. God put us in a garden. That's our first clue. You know, our body is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Holy Spirit, the Bible tells us. And we treat our bodies like dumpsters, right? You don't put trash in a temple. I know a lot of people my age in their 50s are facing this where they go to the doctor and all they get are more pills and told this is the way that you're going to live for the rest of your life and you're going to just have to manage these diseases. Well, when we choose God's way, our body can heal itself. And to me, this was amazing. My arthritis, after 3 months, I woke up one morning and I had no more pain. And that was a miracle for me. And I had lived with an inhaler and on all kinds of medication because my allergies were so bad. I had pneumonia twice. They told me if I had pneumonia again, I could possibly die. They told me that I would have to live with that inhaler and my condition would only get worse and worse. You know, the doctors are quick to give you more medication. They're not very quick to give you any hope. When you share this information with Christians, it's almost like, I don't know, like a wall goes up, that they would rather believe the world system that is pills and procedures and, you know, medications and problems your whole life. They would rather choose that than God's way. Plants heal our body. We're digging our graves with our fork. And it's really sad when you see people that have things like diabetes and heart disease and cancer even, and they're praying for a miracle while continuing to eat the Western diet, the world's diet. They continue to put that in their body, which is causing the problem. They don't see that they're killing themselves.
Genesis 1:29 is part of the first conversation between God and human beings recorded in the Bible. And God tells Adam and Eve, you are to eat the plants and the seed-bearing fruit, period. And immediately after that, God says, and it was very good. And it's the first time in the creation story that God describes creation as very good, tov ma'od. Up until that point, God just says, it's good, it's good, it's good. But when we get the instructions to eat a plant-based diet, now creation is very good.
After Rooterville, we drove Sophia up to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where we spoke with Jeffrey Cohen, the executive director of Jewish Veg, whose mission it is to help Jews to embrace plant-based diets as an expression of the Jewish values of compassion for animals, concern for health, and care for the environment.
Considering what Genesis 1:29 said, it got me thinking, what does the rest of the Bible say? Why aren't all rabbis and clergy and ministers vegetarian or vegan if this is what it says in Genesis 1:29? So I started reading, researching, and to my pleasant surprise, it's actually a pretty consistent theme in the Bible, that a plant-based diet is the ideal, that meat eating, while permitted, is usually framed in a fairly negative and sometimes extraordinarily negative light, and that we're supposed to be treating animals not just with compassion, but with exquisite sensitivity. You know, there's a whole slew of verses in the Bible that command that we treat animals with such sensitivity. Collectively, these are known in Hebrew as Tsar Ba'alei Chaim, which translates to the prevention of suffering to animals. And it says in our Talmud, which is the main rabbinic commentary on the Bible, that not only are we to prevent animal suffering, we are to relieve the suffering of animals whenever we have occasion to do so. And on that basis alone, given how animals are treated today in modern animal agriculture, there's no way we should be consuming animal products. Probably the most misunderstood, the most distorted verse in all of the Bible is not Genesis 1:29, it's what comes right before that. Genesis 1:26. That is the famous dominion verse. So yes, it does say in Genesis 1:26 that human beings were granted dominion over the animals, but two important things to consider about that. Number one is that it's part of the exact same conversation in which we're instructed to eat plants exclusively. So clearly dominion did not give human beings the right to kill animals for food. Secondly, that dominion verse is part of the exact same verse, not just the same conversation, but the same verse where we're told that human beings are created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Therefore, we are to exercise dominion the way that God exercises dominion over human beings. And any rabbi will tell you the primary attributes of God's dominion are mercy and compassion.
From Pennsylvania, we headed northeast to Athens, New York, and visited with Frank Hoffman, who serves on the advisory board of the Christian Vegetarian Association and is co-founder with his wife Mary of the Frank and Mary Hoffman Family Foundation, which is dedicated to cruelty-free living through a vegan lifestyle.
We became vegan for a reason of compassion, but the side effect was that our health improved dramatically. We had all kinds of problems, aches and pains and arthritis starting and coughing and sneezing things, head colds, irritable bowel syndrome, all kinds of things like that. And we found that within about 3 weeks of becoming vegan, our health improved. We didn't have these same symptoms. Both Mary and I are in our late 70s, and we haven't taken medication. I don't know, it's got to be at least 25 years now. But we don't get the chronic diseases that people get. The Bible tells us that if we're a child of God, we're to be a peacemaker. And that as peacemakers, and Paul picks up on this and he says, as peacemaking children of God, we're to help free creation from its present corruption. Well, part of that corruption is the way we live. We've heard people say, when I buy an animal product in the supermarket, I didn't hurt the animal. I'm just buying the product that's sitting there. And I'm saying, no, you actually contributing to it. The first thing you can do, and the most important thing to do in saving this world and to living in the heavenly will of God, starts on your dinner plate.
When we left Frank and Mary's, we drove down to New York City, where we parked Sophia and traveled by transit. Our first stop was on the Upper East Side, where I had the honor and pleasure of meeting Pramoda Chitrabhanu, who is the director of the Jain Meditation International Center in New York City, as well as on the board of PETA India. She is the author of several books, including The Book of Compassion and Rainbow Food for the Vegan Palate.
Only because of the taste buds, only because of our own greed, only because of our own satisfaction of the senses. When are we going to become sensitive? When are we going to understand? Because each and every living being is given a different instrument, and it's a symphony, and we are creating a music out of that instrument, and we forget that each and every one's life is intertwined with each other. How can we disturb one living being? But when we take the dairy, the meat industry, the cows, you are snatching away the 5 senses of those living beings who can hear, who can see, who can feel, who can taste, who can smell. We have no right to take the life of any living being, even though they are not human beings, but they have already got 5 senses. And with one shot, we destroy that. Our heart should really tremble to do all these things. And we don't have any qualms. But the violence is not because of the bad people. It is because of the silence of the good people. So, be a whisper or be a scream. Just be the voice for the voiceless being.
After we left Pramoda's, we traveled down to Union Square, where we were approached by Mike, a compassionate wildlife activist who was out raising awareness about the plight of the elephants.
You said like why elephants, not like pigs and chickens and stuff like that. So elephants are they're called a keystone species. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah, but let's go for it.
Yeah.
Stay me on the night.
So a keystone species basically is a species of animal that has such a disproportionate effect on the ecosystem that were they to disappear, things would change very rapidly. So elephants are a keystone species, bees are a keystone species, even humans are, but in a bad way.
Oh, yeah.
So like if we all suddenly disappeared, everything would just start getting better.
But everything would change for
right,
sure.
But
and
yeah, it would change. Exactly.
Yeah.
So elephants are a keystone species, chickens are not. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that they're less important, because they are still very important. And I do think that our meat industry is really, really messed up. Really, really bad. And I would love to see that change.
Can I ask you this question?
Yeah.
Did you know that in order for a cow to produce milk, that she had to be impregnated every year and her baby taken away after the first day of her life? And if it's a male, it usually goes to veal industry. If it's a female, she ends up in there. Within 4 years of their life, they are slaughtered for meat, and usually they would live 25 years of their life. Did you know that they were taken away?
No, I didn't know that. I mean, again, I'd have to It's very difficult to take the word of somebody. Not to say that I don't think you're informed.
But first of all, do you think the cows just make milk?
I don't know. I don't know enough about them.
Okay.
That's really what I can.
That's the best answer.
Yeah, I don't know.
While we were in Manhattan, we stopped by to see Victoria, who told us about a cow she met many years ago during her visit to a slaughterhouse in southern Missouri.
I meet a lot of people who say, well, I only eat humane meat. I only eat meat from small family farms. Well, these cows came from a small family farm. The farmer drove them in himself. You could tell that these cows knew people and trusted them. So the first couple just walked up the chute and on to death, but the third one was not having any of it. She saw her friends go first. She heard the screams and she smelled the smells that I'd been smelling all day. She was not about to walk up that ramp. So she just planted herself and stood there. And the man up at the top of the ramp, about time to go home, he was ready to go see his kids. He whistled to her. He whistled to her the way he'd whistle to his dog when he went home in 20 minutes. And this cow seemed to trust him. She kind of turned her head and looked at him, and it was as if she was deciding whether or not to override all her instincts, what she was hearing, what she was smelling, and instead do something that we pride ourselves as humans in being able to do: trust another person. So with this trust, misplaced as it turned out, she walked to the man who had whistled to her. He got her with the captive bolt pistol. She was hoisted up, her throat was slit, her beautiful skin was sliced off her and into a pile to go for shoes and boots and belts and handbags. And all of a sudden, she was no longer a being. She was in the process of becoming beef. Now, I knew that in a few days, her parts and pieces would wind up at a supermarket in St. Louis. They would be on a styrofoam tray and cellophane wrapping, and they would be purchased by good people. They'd be purchased by people who love their children and give to charity and go to church. Well, they didn't know her. I did, for just a few minutes at the very end of her life. But because I knew her, it's my obligation to share her story.
In the Muslim faith, we have this really beautiful saying from the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in which he says that none of you truly have attained to faith until you love for one another what you love for your own self, which is very similar to the golden rule that was preached by all of the great prophets and sages. You know, I think as time has gone on, the spiritual and ethical tradition has been able to widen that to not only humanity, but to a lot of the creation of God, both in terms of the environment as well as the animals and just every living being.
From Manhattan, we drove to Princeton, New Jersey, to speak with Imam Sohaib Sultan, Princeton University's first Muslim chaplain and author of The Quran for Dummies and The Quran and the Sayings of the Prophet Muhammad.
We are living in a time in which there is a great exploitation of the environment and of animals, and the way that we see the farming practices evolve to fit the consumerist societies and the materialistic societies that we have formed has greatly harmed the environment and has greatly affected animals at a level unprecedented in our history as human beings. One should really consider the mass production of food and the unethical means by which that food is produced in our modern age. And we should really consider whether we want to be part of that evil practice or whether we want to be part of the solution to restore the balance to the environment, to restore the balance to the ecosystem, and to restore the balance to the human beings. Because when the human beings are exploiting the environment is going to turn its wrath against the human beings. And we're constantly seeing that, from the lack of access to water, to air pollution, to scarcity of food. All of this is being caused by our mistreatment of God's earth. You know, there's a really important passage in the Quran that says that, "O humanity, your actions are certainly bound to rebound against your own selves." So there's this idea that whatever we do, we're going to see its consequences, both the good and the beautiful, and the ugly and the wrong. And it's also important for as Muslims to understand that this idea of karma, this idea of our actions rebounding against our own selves, is not only limited to this life, but there's also an afterlife reality to it. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he said that on the day of resurrection, when people will have to answer for their deeds before God, one will even have to answer for the innocent sparrow that they killed.
What is the difference between pity and compassion? So pity is, I see the cow, they just ran it through a factory farm, it lived this awful life, they slaughtered it in this awful way, and I'm like, poor cow, that's bad, they're torturing all these cows, this is terrible. Wow, I'm hungry. Where's the closest McDonald's? No link whatsoever. Versus compassion, which is, they're suffering in this industry, they're suffering in the way that we treat animals, they're suffering in eating suffering from the way that this animal was killed. I don't want to contribute to that suffering. I quit. I'm not going to contribute to your suffering.
It was in Tacoma Park, Maryland, where we met Nazarick Amen, a naturopathic doctor, a practitioner of Chinese medicine, and an organic farmer who's been vegan for over 25 years.
In the beginning, I worked actually as an EMT. I was an intermediate level medic. And, working in the medical system while studying to become a doctor at that time, and just seeing the contradictions. It's not focused on prevention. It's really focused on these sort of quick fix pharmaceutical interventions. And, as a provider, when someone's having an asthma attack and you go in and you give them drugs and you see that asthma attack break and those people can breathe again, that's beautiful. But in another, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, and you get the same call, it sort of takes some of the glamour out. And you walk into these people's homes and you see like they're having this asthma attack or this sickle cell crisis or whatever other disease. And here, right next to the bed, they've just got through eating a 3-pack for $1 glow-in-the-dark set of cookies with a big glass of cow's milk. And, you're asking yourself the question, do you think that, any of what you just ate has anything to do with how you're feeling right now? We don't really get to ask that question. I felt better immediately from going vegan, but in a couple years after I went vegan, I was probably the strongest I've ever been in my life. And, I maintain that on a day-to-day basis. So, anyway, I'm 95 years old, and
I had this one case, I remember this woman very well. I said to her, your problem is not that you have a spastic colon. It said you're eating foods that are going to make you sick because they contain lactose. And to my surprise, she said, oh, I know that. And I said, well, if you know that these foods are going to make you sick, why are you continuing to eat them? And she said, because the government says I have to. The U.S. dietary guidelines say that I have to include dairy foods in my diet in order to be healthy. And I, of course, explained to her that no, you didn't, that you don't need dairy foods for any reason, that they're, as I'd said to her, cows don't drink milk, but there's plenty of calcium in their milk, and it's because they get it from the green plants that they eat. And that if you eat green leafy vegetables, you'll get plenty of calcium in your diet. But it really upset me that people were being made ill by listening to recommendations from the government that were not based on science, but rather were based on marketing.
We left Nazarik's farm and crossed over into Virginia, where we had a conversation with Dr. Milton Mills, who practices urgent care medicine in the Washington, D.C. area and is on the National Advisory Board of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He is a practicing Seventh-day Adventist, which is one of the very rare Protestant denominations that recommends a vegetarian diet to its members.
God designed us, and He gave us an owner's manual, and it's called the Bible. And in the Bible, He tells us what we should be eating. He tells us what He designed us to eat. And if we care about ourselves, and if we care about what God wants, then we will follow His instructions for a healthy life. And when I see people who call themselves Christians eating fried chicken and pork chops and all this stuff that they know is unhealthy and that's going to destroy their health simply because it tastes good, then I have to ask, do you love the pleasure of eating this unhealthy food more than you love God? Because if you really love God, then you would do what He asks us to do, and that is eat a plant-based diet. And when you realize the type of misery and pain and suffering that's inflicted on other animals in order to raise them by the billions just so that they can be killed and dismembered and people can eat them, it's impossible for, I think, a feeling person to justify that, particularly someone who says that they believe in a loving God. It's one thing if, it's a matter of life, death, and necessity, but in modern life, it's not.
The next day, we had to say a sad goodbye to Maya, who was off to a holistic veterinarian conference before she headed back to Israel. And then Melody and I and Sophia made our way back to the sacred woods of North Florida.
Abracadabra. The environmental crisis is not a crisis of the bees and the birds or the trees and the toads. It's a crisis of how we live as spiritual beings in a physical reality. Therefore, in order to address this crisis, we're going to need to address the spiritual roots.
Just a few days after Melody's 4th birthday, I found myself on an airplane headed to Marrakesh, Morocco to join our producer Silas, who had invited me to attend the 22nd United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP22, where people from all over the world come together to work on finding solutions to the climate crisis that is threatening the future of life on our planet.
What are some of those spiritual roots? This includes the desire for instant self-gratification, consumerism. We are facing a climate crisis, a planetary emergency, which is really messaging to us that the human way of living is out of balance. By the end of the 21st century, human beings are likely to extinct 5 million of the 10 million species on this planet. And so, according to the Jewish tradition, it is forbidden to extinct a species. We have a mandate to be stewards, to care for the creation that God has entrusted to us, to be righteous, to be mindful, and that comes down to the smallest level of human consumption. Everything that we consume, we need to think, am I elevating this object in the highest way? Am I using it in holiness? Am I reusing it? Do I actually need this? If we do that, then we're living at a higher vibrational frequency. We're living in resonance with the divine. We're living in resonance with the planet that God has given us.
We know that of all the energy that human beings are putting into the climate system via the greenhouse gases, 93% of that is ending up in the oceans. And this has led to an increased acidification of the ocean. The acidity makes it very difficult for shelled animals to continue to fabricate their shells. And so we're beginning to see threats to coral reefs. We're beginning to see threats to shelled animals in general. And the most important ones are the little coccolithophores, part of the plankton population. And if their shells are compromised, they can't live. And the danger will be that these are the guys, the plankton are the ones that are actually manufacturing the oxygen in the atmosphere that we breathe a few weeks after it leaves the ocean. So ocean acidification is a global issue that affects absolutely everybody and all of the living things in the ocean. It's my belief that societies in which people care for each other are societies that will also take care of the environment. And so there's a relationship between our human compassion and our compassion for nature. And now both are needed to assure the survival of our civilization.
I would say that compassion is central to our religious tradition within Islam. And as a Muslim trying to be faithful to its teachings, I have to strive to become more compassionate in my life. As an example, every chapter of the Holy Quran's 114 chapters begins with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of God, most compassionate, most merciful. A small chick fell out of its nest in the tree onto the ground, and one of the Prophet's companions was playing with it in quite a ruthless way. When the Prophet came upon him, he became very stern and angry. And he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm just amusing myself." He said, "How can you amuse yourself with the child of someone else that's not your child? Return the child to its mother." And what's very interesting is, in the Arabic language, they have two words. The word normally used for baby chick is one word. The word that is used for child, which is exclusively used in the human sense, which means awlad, is the term that he used for this chick. So in other words, its relation to its mother is the same as the relationship of a human mother to his own child.
In fact, 84% of the whole population claim that they are religious people. So first of all, we have to consider ourselves as a part of the problem.
As a member of the Central Committee of the World Council of Churches, I am in the ecumenical group of the WCC, and my role here is to remind our leaders and the negotiators to behave like responsible parents, to look after their children, and to realize that the whole humanity is one family, and we have to protect each other, and above all, of course, to protect our planet for the future generations. So compassion means to be merciful, but means also to protect justice. And if we fail to protect justice, then we risk our security, we risk our peaceful coexistence. And when we protect nature, when we protect animals and anything around us, this is the best way of preparation to protect also ourselves and to protect the whole humanity. We pray for our leaders, we pray for the people not to have who they suffer. So when I finish my prayers, I have to find ways to participate in the problems, how to change things. If I pray for the people who they don't have water and food, I have to find ways to go, to give the food. For one tap, we cannot give water to the whole people, but for the ones who pass next to you, you can give them water.
Last year, in the run-up to the Paris climate talks, a number of religious organizations issued statements on climate change. And so our organization issued the Hindu Declaration on Climate Change for 2016. And that was signed by over 60 Hindu leaders and organizations from across the world. And within that, we put forward the case for why Hindus should be concerned about climate change and what Hindus should and could be doing to address climate change. And within that, one of the key things we spoke about was diet, and to live a lifestyle which minimizes harm on the environment, on animals, and on other people. And so within that, the advocation of a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle was something that we strongly said that Hindus, actually not just Hindus, all concerned people of the world should take very seriously. If we want to create a world which is full of compassion, which is full of love, which is full of peace, then we have to imbibe that and live that within our own hearts and minds.
Because we have a system, a socioeconomic system that's growth-oriented and that's based on consumption as an organizing value and competition as an organizing principle. And because it's growth-oriented, we have been growing our population and our livestock continuously. See, if you look at what has happened to the biomass distribution of the planet, our weight is now double the weight of all the wildlife from 10,000 years ago. And our livestock is 2.5 times our weight. And what is worse is that our livestock eat 5 times as much food as we do, because they are mostly young animals and they're eating a lot in order to grow. It's as if you have a bunch of weightlifters who are lifting 5 times their weight, and they discover that they are on quicksand and they're sinking. So what is the first thing they should do with the weight they're lifting? Should we not drop those weights? Or should we continue to hold on to them? That's the situation we are in at the moment. But we are in a society where we are taught to look outside for happiness. We are taught, that's where it is. And the entire socioeconomic system depends on us believing this, that the happiness is outside us. So we really are at a position where we have to change our socioeconomic system. We have to change it so that we are looking for happiness inside, all of us, so that we are reducing our demands on the earth and therefore allowing the earth to come back, to regenerate again. Veganism is a way of living where we seek to never deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily. No longer is it necessary to eat animal foods. So knowing that, we can now get in alignment with who we really are, because all of us want to be compassionate to all life, because that's who we are. So the most important step that an individual can do today to address environmental destruction is to adopt a plant-based diet, which is as local as possible, which is as organic as possible. So it's local, organic, vegan eating. It's love.
The day before I left Morocco, I joined thousands of environmental activists from all over the world as we took to the streets of Marrakesh in a march for climate justice, hoping one day that these marches will include justice for animals as well.
I am a ladybug from the forest. Do you like to ask some questions?
How does India have the largest export of leather products in the world and can still be a cow-friendly country?
On the second day of 2017, I once again found myself flying over the ocean. Holger Ike, one of our producers who lives in Hong Kong, had invited me to join him in India, where we would explore the teachings of compassion in some of the world's most ancient spiritual traditions. We would start our journey in the city of Mumbai, where we spoke to Nitha Shanti, who lived 6 years as a Buddhist monk and now travels internationally, sharing practical wisdom teachings for happiness and enlightenment.
I used to think for a long time, I need to be like the Buddha, I'm not enough like the Buddha, I need to be more like the Buddha. Then one day it settled on me that I'm not the Buddha. I'm not the Buddha. Even if I try my very best, I'll be a second-rate Buddha. But my eyes shone when I realized, even if the Buddha tries his best, he'll be a second-rate Nitya Shanti. In the Buddhist tradition, this is the word for compassion is karuna. And karuna is known as one of the noblest states we can experience as a human being. One of the most noble qualities, it's called actually a boundless state. When your mind is imbalanced, all you're concerned about is me and my little world, and at the most, people around me. But as your mind gets more and more balanced, you realize all beings, we are all in the same boat. We all seek to be free from suffering. And so the response of a balanced mind to suffering is compassion, is the desire to alleviate that suffering in whatever way they possibly can. And that's compassion.
Vedanta is Indian philosophy which originated in the Vedas, but it is simply knowledge of yourself. Vedanta says there are 3 distinct types of thoughts in a human being. The highest is sattva, which is called pure thoughts, unselfish thoughts, compassionate thoughts, loving thoughts, thoughts that contemplate on the higher, the transcendental. A person who is in sattva, pure thought, will not do anything that harms others. And to eat the flesh of another creature because you find it tasty, or even if you think it's nutritious, is abhorring to a person with pure thoughts. Vedanta says at all times in your life, you must have an attitude of not wanting to injure, hurt, or be nasty to anyone in thought, word, or deed.
While in Mumbai, we had the wonderful opportunity to visit a beautiful, world-renowned Jain temple, where we had the pleasure of speaking with Urvi Shah, a devout Jain who gave us a tour of the temple.
I'm a Jain and very proud of it actually. We believe
the most in non-violence towards any kind of living beings, be it animals, birds, or even microorganisms, which is why we are pure vegetarians. We do not have any eggs. Plants that even grow underground, which are called roots, basically potatoes, onion, garlic, carrots, beet, all of these things are out of our purview because uprooting them would mean killing a lot of microorganisms, which is why we avoid all of these. So non-violence is basically the foundation of my religion.
Do you consume dairy at all?
Yes, I do.
Now, it may be different here, but in the United States, like in order for a cow to produce milk, they artificially inseminate her once a year, and within 24 hours, they take her baby away.
Oh my God.
If it's a male, they take it to the veal industry.
So that's a terrible thing to do. But in India, I guess we worship cows. So, I mean, however advanced we are becoming day by day, there are still people in rural India and probably few even in urban who actually worship cows. So, for us to do such a terrible thing to them, I'm not sure if that really happens. But now that you mention it, I think I would try alternatives to it, to reduce my consumption.
Often I ask my patient, do you take milk? And they'll say, no, I hardly take milk. I don't take milk. And then we sit down and start writing down. Chai, yes. Curd, yes. Maybe ice cream, yes. Maybe paneer, yes. Maybe ghee, yes. And it can be literally like half a liter of milk every day. So you do consume milk. If you have just consumed one slice of cheese, you have already consumed 16 ounces of milk. The Indian subcontinent in Asia is very obsessed with dairy products because it's so deeply ingrained that they think it's vegetarian. Milk production is very high. It's highest in the world. In fact, India is one of the largest exporter of beef in the world, thanks to the dairy industry, because after repeated artificial insemination 3 or 4 times, about 6 or 7 years of age, now cow is spent. She's of no use. Also the young calf, the baby male calf is allowed to just die, and so the veal is produced because there's no use of male calf anywhere in any industry. From the times of Lord Krishna, we consume so much dairy. It's there in our temples as prasad. It's there on any good occasion, marriage, everything is made from dairy. Ghee particularly is used a lot. So it just doesn't go out of the sight of Indian mind. So I had to write a book on dairy alternatives and show them the way that you can make buttermilk, you can make yogurt, you can make ice creams, you can make all the Indian sweets same way, exactly same, tasting even much better, even healthier.
One of the first patients I remember was a man who had diabetes, but that's not why he came to me. He had diabetes and he was being given medicines and the blood sugar wouldn't come under control, but he came to me because he had the complications of diabetes. He was losing his eyesight. And when I suggested to him to stop all the dairy, within 2 weeks his blood sugar came down and his eyesight came back. It was just so amazing, and then over a period of time he went on a whole plant-based diet and improved even further. So this was one of my early cases which brought to my mind how much changing our diet really helps, because our body always works to heal. I actually realized that medicines come in the way of healing. In fact, medicines never cure, but the body heals. I also run a 21-day residential program where we have people coming in with all kinds of diseases and we do all the lab reports at the beginning, and as they get better we take off medications and they're given buffet meals, and we have cooking classes every day, we have yoga, meditation, and within 21 days most of them get off at least 70% of the medications. Many of them are off all their medications and they have more energy than they ever had before, and we do lab reports all over again at the end so that they can actually see the difference between the two reports. And even I'm amazed. Not only they're amazed, but I'm amazed every time how fast the body can actually heal if we take away all the things that make it sick.
Holger and I left Mumbai and flew over to Udaipur, where we met up with Silas, and I ran into Dharmada, a friend I had made during the Animal Rights Conference in LA. She introduced us to her friend Ashutosh, And together, we all traveled out to Animal Aid Rescue, where we met the founder, Jim Myers, who along with his wife, daughter, and 50 full-time staff members and volunteers from around the world have rescued over 65,000 injured and ill street animals, including dogs, cows, camels, and donkeys, just to name a few, since they opened their gates in 2003.
In the state of Rajasthan, it is not legal to euthanize a cow. Any of the other animals you see here, the monkey, the blind dogs, the handicapped dogs, all can be euthanized. But the cow is given this special protection. A dairy in the city, somebody, that cow there, this one, that one, stopped giving milk, and at night it was pushed out into the street. And cruelly, the same one that you say is so holy we aren't even going to euthanize them. We're so enraptured with their spirit to keep it alive. Every single cow represents an abandonment, that it was not profitable to feed that cow anymore, to do any more with it. So you've removed it and you've broken a law. This animal at night would be eaten out by dogs and pigs alive in the streets with no medicine to alleviate pain, no one to shelter its eyes in a 49-degree-Celsius day, to move the flies away. And here, it was the only way I could get not happy, because it's nothing to be happy about, but I could get satisfied that some justice was being done. So that this cow, which this dear lady is helping us with, this cow is going to die in a few days. It's not going to be, its legs aren't going to get stronger and get better and return to the city, find its long-lost brothers and sisters. The least favorite question a serious politician in India wants to hear is what happens to the male cows. And so that story has to be suppressed if you're going to keep up all the sensitivity. So no one shows the links.
What I see is cows running around in the cities, on the streets, eating trash, eating plastic. They are coming to Animal Aid because they are injured by cars, they get in accidents, they have broken spines, they have broken legs, they have blessing in their stomachs, and this is how you treat your mother, the holy cow. I wish that all that spiritual people, that they would stop talking about compassion, that they would really practice compassion and stop drinking milk and dairy products, because this is what causes so much pain and suffering and death. If we unconsciously hurt animals, we cannot be in peace, we cannot be in harmony, we cannot come home if we unconsciously hurt other beings. We can find peace only if we practice peace.
Vegetarians don't know what they are doing to animals. Vegetarians are in a misconception that they are very kind to animals despite they are consuming milk, wearing leather, wearing silk, pearls, fur, everything. In India, since cow is treated as a holy creature, milk is given the status of nectar. People know that alcohol is not good for you. When they smoke cigarette, they know it's not good for them. But when they drink milk, they think they are doing good to their body. They are being good to the holy cow also. They think that by milking a cow, they are protecting a cow. They are thinking just the opposite of the reality. It's not holy, it's sinful. And what is sin should be recognized as sin, not as holy, not as sacred. Veganism is just a result of your own compassion towards all beings. And compassion is just a realization of your connectivity with the nature. When you connect with your nature, with all the beings, or rather whole of existence, you spontaneously become compassionate with everyone.
After visiting the royal palace and 2 Hindu temples, the Jagdish and the Karni Mata, I had to say goodbye to Holger as he flew home to Hong Kong, and I journeyed forward to New Delhi, where I would have the unique opportunity to speak to 2 Digambar Jain Sadhus, sky-clad Jain saints, who have freed themselves of all attachments and worldly possessions, including clothing, money, and even dishes and silverware.
Jain religion is saying live and let live. We don't use any animal products. Non-violence is the very highest thinking. Non-violence is main thing of all religions.
The Jain religion is said to be around 5,000 years old, and it has a rich history of non-violence and vegetarianism, and has libraries filled with their collective knowledge and wisdom. Yet there was really only one question I wanted to ask these holy saints of Ahimsa.
तो ये कह रहे हैं कि अगर ये हो रहा है और दूसरी चीज़ है इतनी हिंसा भी होती है और ये सब लोग एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं यहाँ से तो बोलते हैं एक तो हिंसा हो रही है दूसरा इन्वायरमेंट को इतना ज़्यादा संतुलित हो रहा है तो ये कह रहे हैं कि ऐसे होने से डेयरी को लेना कहीं सी तरीके से भी जस्टिफाई है क्या?
नहीं जस्टिफाई नहीं
लेना डेयरी लेना जस्टिफाई है क्या?
जस्टिफाई नहीं है। हम अहिंसक हैं पूरे पूर्ण अहिंसक हैं और डेयरी मिल्क यूज़ नहीं करते। वीगन
As much as I loved and felt at home in India, 2 weeks was as long as I could keep myself away from Melody and our sanctuary in the woods.
When you were a kid, did you get really dirty and your mom get mad?
I did get really dirty, but you know, I had a pretty cool mom. I don't think she got mad about it.
How old are you now?
I will be 50 in a few weeks.
I forgot.
One of the great Hasidic rabbis, Rebbe Nachman, taught that the day you were born was the day that God decided the world could not exist without you. And that is true for every being. That every being that has breath, God has said, the world cannot exist without them. And to honor God is to honor the holy breath of every being. And to see that the world needs each of us.
I was very excited to have the honor and delight of sitting down with Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz while he was attending a rabbinical conference in Atlanta, Georgia. Rabbi Yanklowitz is a social justice activist, a sought-after educational and motivational speaker, and the author of 7 books on Jewish spirituality and ethics. He is the founder of the Shemayan Vaharetz Institute, a graduate of both Harvard and Columbia, and the only person I've personally met who's donated one of his kidneys to a stranger.
The book of Psalms teaches that the world is built through kindness. We bring heaven down to earth by perpetuating kindness. In every interaction, in every act of food consumption, in every choice we make, we have the opportunity to elevate the sparks of holiness in whatever we encounter. We have the opportunity to objectify and abuse, or we have the opportunity to see the holiness in everything. When my children were born and I held them for the first time, the level of love I felt was so infinite. This is how God experiences all of God's creatures. Each creature is held with infinite love. And to take the godly perspective of the universe is to treat every being with love, to treat every being as an end in themselves. All of our religions teach this in their purest form. So the most central question we can ask ourselves every day is, how will I increase compassion in the world today through my every choice?
I long ago started just saying I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, because even if you are not a Christian coming to that conversation, you know enough about Jesus to think that you're going to generally agree with most stuff Jesus says. I mean, turning the other cheek and forgiveness and goodness. I mean, most people agree that Jesus was teaching the right values, even if they're not Christians. And it's because I love Jesus so much that I'm a vegan. I'm not a vegan who also coincidentally is a Christian. I am full on a vegan because I love Jesus Christ.
Although I'd already shot several hundred hours of footage, and I was a quarter way through the rough cut, I couldn't pass up the amazing opportunity to travel back to Manhattan and speak to Susie Welch, who is a business journalist, best-selling author, and a regular contributor on the Today Show. She's a devout evangelical Christian and an animal rights activist who currently sits on the advisory board of the Good Food Institute.
Jesus' earliest followers, many of them were vegan because they got it. They got that Jesus was about mercy, compassion, and love, and life. Choose life. Give life. Stop killing, show kindness to everything. And so Jesus' earliest fanatical followers were vegans. And at one point in Acts, Paul, frustrated with them, says, stop talking about what you're eating. You're sort of taking up all of our time with your vegan diet. And let's pay attention to other things. He had bigger sort of philosophical issues that he wanted everybody paying attention to. But we know historically that Jesus' earliest followers, the people sort of closest to his message, were vegan because of him. So it's not like, I invented this. I am like just following a tradition of Christians all along who've gotten that connection. But the connection's been buried. It's been buried for a long time for cultural reasons. But then people come back to this concept of dominion. That's the big one for Christians. Well, God gave us dominion over all of his creation. Well, then you have to think about what dominion means. Well, God has dominion over us. What does that mean? God's dominion over us. He tells us exactly what dominion means. People like to debate what dominion means, but God tells us what dominion means. It means loving, nurturing, life-filled, hope-filled, compassionate, merciful, tender love. Okay? And if that's what dominion means, and God's demonstrating it towards us, which he is, then it's our turn to use that same exact bunch of words in how we treat God's creation. And I don't know, slaughterhouses are not included in that. And so for me, well, yeah, bring up dominion. Bring it, because the Bible tells us what dominion is. And if you believe that dominion is what God tells us it is, then you have to stop eating animals.
So Roman Catholics take Scripture very seriously, but we always pair it with tradition, saying that we can't really even interpret Scripture without the tradition as well. And the tradition on animals, all the way to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the official teaching of the Catholic Church via the Catechism, is so interesting on animals, including a almost justice-like command saying that we owe animals kindness. Often in moral theology, we think about justice as being what we owe other people. And the language of justice is used in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. We owe animals kindness. That's unambiguous. And so much of what we do today, of course, is inconsistent with that, and Catholics have to ask those questions.
While in New York City, Victoria and I visited the beautiful campus of Fordham University, which was founded by the Catholic Diocese of New York in 1841. There we spoke with Charles Camozzi, an associate professor of theology and social ethics, and an author whose books include For Love of Animals and Peter Singer and Christian Ethics.
I think so much of where injustice comes from is our refusing to apply our principles consistently. So we say we believe this, but then when it comes to this other thing, where it looks like we have to act a way contrary to the way we're currently acting, if we want to follow that principle seriously, we kind of abandon the principle. I use the analogy in my classes, arguments and principles are like buses, they're not like taxis. So if you have a principle, you got to follow it wherever it goes, or you got to get on a different bus. You can't just tell your principle wherever it's going to end up. That's just being irrational. So much injustice has come from that kind of irrationality. We believe in the dignity of the human person, except in slavery. We believe in nonviolence, except when we perpetuate war in the Crusades. We believe in the most vulnerable, except when it comes to how we eat. And so in the book, I'm trying to call all Christians to say, if we really claim to believe these things, we ought to change our whole lives. Or let's not claim to believe these things, because if we just pick and choose where we end up as a result of these principles, we don't really actually believe the principles are true. And to me, that's just what it means to be a Christian. It means following Christ in every aspect of your life, not just picking and choosing where you do that.
Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the founders of Unity, were staunch vegetarians all their lives. Talked about it a lot. I think the archives has 135 talks from Charles Fillmore about being vegetarian. They wrote about it in their publications. And so, having been to seminary and knowing Unity's history, I knew they were vegetarian. I didn't know quite how ferociously they were until I became vegan and started reading more about it.
So it turns out the founders of Unity, the church I was attending when I became vegan, were vegetarians in the late 1800s and even included it in their statement of faith until it was removed in 1939. So I joined Victoria at Unity Village in Missouri, where she arranged an interview with her friend, Reverend Ellen Davenport, Unity's Vice President of Content and Media, to ask why no one at Unity had ever told me about this, and to discuss how Unity could be more proactive in sharing Charles's teachings about not eating animals.
A lot of people find Unity as refugees from rigid religions, and so they're hypersensitive to being told what to do or being told they're wrong or bad. And so Unity's leaders, including me, are probably pretty hesitant to talk about there is this other way to eat that you might find would enhance your spiritual journey. We may be moving in that direction. We have more and more ministers who are talking about it and who think Unity really should insist on it from world headquarters, which isn't going to happen anytime soon because we don't want to tell people what to do. But we can talk about it, and we can revive the idea that the Fillmores preached vegetarianism and saw it as a spiritual practice.
Learn how to eat better, get healthy, and help animals. Welcome to Main Street Vegan with your host, Victoria Moran.
The Main Street Vegan podcast on Unity Radio is one of the ways Unity has begun moving back toward their vegetarian roots. And after speaking with Ellen, I look forward to seeing what other ways they'll find to honor Charles and Myrtle's original teachings about not eating or wearing our fellow earthlings. Over 74 billion farmed animals are bred and slaughtered every year, most of them while they're still just babies. And in the United States, they eat nearly 70% of the grain we grow, and raising them uses over 80% of our water and almost half of our land. And it's also the number one cause of water and air pollution, as well as deforestation, species extinction, and ocean dead zones. How long can we continue to try and justify this? All of the great spiritual traditions agree that along with life's joys, there will also be suffering. But so much of the suffering I see in the world around me is unnecessary and caused by the choices we make every day. Those choices are having a devastating effect on our individual and collective karma and health, and they're threatening the future of our children. My prayer is that each of us will challenge ourselves to be more kind and compassionate with our thoughts, words, and actions, to vote wisely with our dollars, and to take better care of all of creation, including our body temples, and to take the time each day to go within and ask some version of what can I do to make the world better for those yet to come. And then listen carefully for that still, quiet voice to answer.
All around this great big world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around this great big world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around this great big world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Eating fruit is help your brain like mine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine now. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hallelujah. Namaste. I ain't gonna hide it under no bushel, no. I'm gonna let it shine. I ain't gonna hide it under no bushel, no. I'm gonna let it shine now. I ain't gonna hide it under no bushel, no. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. shine now. To everyone I know, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Woo! Let it shine now. Everywhere you go now, to everyone you know, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, Lord. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hallelujah. Namaste now. Don't forget to pray now. And everywhere you go, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the Village Brass Band.